Today, I want to talk about perceptions of learning. How do you feel about learning, and how do you approach it? It's probably similar to how you approach work in general. You might dread it, procrastinate, or not really engage with it more than you really need to. Think of your school assignments. They can be very soulless, and you might consider it to be busy work that's really just designed to waste your time and ultimately teach you nothing. Just think about all the times you need to write thousands of words worth of essays just to never think about what you wrote after you wrote it. I think university has really corrupted our perception of what learning could and should be by making it into an endless grind of memorization and busy work, ultimately leading to brain dumping and not learning anything new. It should really be a constructive effort driven by passion, by allowing you to build upon your skills in a meaningful way that drives personal growth and impact in your life. But it isn't, and that's just the reality. University doesn't teach you in a constructive and meaningful way. But of course, university is not going to go out and fix this. You need to fix this for you. You need to learn how to learn and enjoy the process. And so today I want to tell a story about how I did this exact thing and maybe describe some things that you might be able to apply in your own life. So recently I had this cool idea that I wanted to work on in terms of a programming project that I thought would be a nice addition to my resume. And it basically involved creating a website that had some nice styling and would essentially allow you to upload pictures of animals, and then there would be an AI or a machine learning model in the background that would go and classify your animal. So it would be something similar to what already exists on something like the iPhone, where you can kind of press down on the animals and it'll tell you what kind of animal is in your picture. So I wanted to create something like that, but for myself, just as a learning experience and some sort of nice addition to my resume. But of course, I've never learned anything really about machine learning. I don't even know the first thing about deep learning or anything. But that didn't really matter to me. I knew what I wanted to do. I had a goal. And so I then worked backwards to identify what I needed to actually make it a reality. The first thing was fairly obvious. I needed to know how to do web development. Fortunately, I already know how to develop websites. That's something I learned through school and refined through personal projects. The second thing was actually learning some sort of deep learning framework. I actually chose PyTorch just because it's rather Pythonic and very intuitive in terms of its syntax and customizability. I also wanted to learn about AWS so I could basically take my model and put it in a Docker container, which I also needed to learn about, and put it on the AWS server and have my website basically access the AWS server to get the model and inference it. So this is a fairly complex project, fairly ambitious, probably the most ambitious project I've worked on. And I haven't really brought it to life yet, but I've made a fair bit of progress in my learning journey. So the first thing I did when working backward from my goal was identify what I needed to learn. And so the first thing I started with was PyTorch. So I looked on YouTube for some good tutorials, and I ended up finding Daniel Bork's PyTorch tutorial. He is amazing. He posted a 25-hour tutorial on the basics of PyTorch. And so I went through the whole thing. But one thing I do want to warn you about, and this is something that I intentionally tried to avoid, is falling into tutorial hell. And that basically means that you go through the tutorial, you code along with the teacher, but when you actually go on your own to apply it yourself, you can't apply any of your knowledge. You blank out. And this essentially means that you didn't learn anything. You can't generalize your knowledge. You weren't actually learning, you were just following along mindlessly. And so that is something that I intentionally tried to avoid, and I'm going to tell you how. So every few hours within the course, I would stop, I would review what I learned, and then I would go to ChatGPT, tell it what I learned, and I would have it generate a mini project for me that I could then follow along with. So I essentially started with the framework that the AI generated, and I worked through it by reviewing the notes I took in the course and by doing some research of my own, researching errors that I got, learning a thing or two. And by doing this process every couple hours throughout the course, I was able to really drill down into my brain the various topics by learning the hard way, by actually taking some of the things that were presented in the course and doing my own thing with it, doing an application that I understood and I understood how it worked, not just an application that the tutorial giver was doing that you don't fully understand. And so I did this every few hours throughout the course, and I finished the 25-hour video in about 3.5 weeks. That's because I was doing it about 3 or 4 hours every single day on top of university. And so that kind of speaks to the kind of persistence that you need to have. I didn't take a single day off. And maybe I'm a little bit lucky in that I had the opportunity to not take a day off, but that was really fundamental. So I gave myself no chance to forget about anything. And by basically working on a project every few hours, it means that at least 4 or 5 times a week, I had some original code that I had generated. And so something that I'm proud of is I recently finished the course, and I was actually able to take what I had learned, and without looking at any of the code I had previously written alongside the course or any of the previous mini projects I had done, I created, I would say, like a large mini project. I went and I created my own machine learning model based on what I had learned in PyTorch. And it was essentially able to do everything I needed it to do. And of course, there were some immense challenges in doing it by myself. There was just some foundational stuff that I really didn't understand, like how you can train it to be very, very effective. But not having that full understanding was okay. Now that I had the foundations for how to build a model, I was able to go and research how can I make my model even better. And so that led me down a self-learning rabbit hole of learning about stuff like data augmentation, to change your training data to make it more diverse, to allow the model to generalize better. It also involved different training techniques like learning rate decay, batch normalization, and stuff like that. So of course you don't need to know any of that stuff, but I'm just describing that I was able to take my foundations and go further with it to do my own research and explore what I needed for my specific case. And I think that's really empowering because I was able to do that independently of the tutorial, and more importantly, independently of using ChatGPT to solve my problems for me. Now, to be completely transparent, I did use ChatGPT, but it was only to guide my learning. I described to it that I was having trouble getting my accuracy up when I was training. And so it pointed me in some directions. It mentioned maybe you should try out data augmentation, or maybe you should try learning weight decay. And so that pointed me in a good direction. So I think ChatGPT can be good for pointing you in a direction, but when you are learning, whether it's in your university courses or in your self-learning, do not rely on artificial intelligence like ChatGPT to give you the answers, because you won't learn a thing. I really think that you need to struggle through some of these things to really be able to pick up some knowledge that you're actually going to retain. So next, I plan on picking up AWS and how I can actually load my model using Docker. And before I go to AWS, I need to learn about Docker. And so this is a whole process. But now that I've established a pattern of how I'm going to learn, I can apply it to these different topics as well. And then I'm just going to practice the hell out of it. It doesn't matter how long it takes. This isn't something I need to crank out in a week. Because it's self-learning and because it's a self-directed project, I can take as long as I need for it. As long as I do it right and I learn something from it, then it was all worth it. And I think that by going out on your own and learning just for yourself, you're going to find a sense of gratification and pride in knowing that you were able to do your own research and create something brand new without the need for university to spoon feed you that information. And I think that's the most empowering thing that you need to understand, you can take away from this, It's about building yourself up. It's not about memorizing course materials, because a lot of course materials are 15 to 20 years old. But by doing self-learning, you can learn things that are brand new, cutting-edge technology. And that's how you're really going to get ahead in your career and find success in life. Thank you so much for watching.